Hey guys, Tim here from Algonaut. So, if you're getting into making drum and bass, a staple sound you need to know how to make is the classic hoover. Basically, a hoover bass is a subby filtered bass with heaps of movement and modulation to make it sound fat. Now, there are quite a few tutorials already out there covering how to make a hoover, but they usually only cover one method. The truth is, there are several ways to make a hoover sound, and depending on your track, combining different methods might be the key to getting that perfect bass. So I'm going to spend some time covering all the tricks on how to make a great hoover. As always, as part of these Underground Masterclass videos, at the end I'll give you a pack of all the patches and loops and MIDI that I've made, so you can take them away and use them in your own stuff. So let's get into it. So we're going to be using Massive to make these hoovers. Massive is a synth that basically everyone has, and it's really good at making hoover basses. So let's go. So let's initialize the patch. So what have we got now? We've got a saw wave. It's going to go File, New Sound, still got a saw wave. Alright, let's rearrange these filters. So in serial, filter 2 up, and mix to mix 2. So we have the potential of using both filters. And one thing we should do when we go new sound and massive is by default it's turning on this glide. So we're turning glide to 0. Alright, now we're good to go. So the first method for making a hoover is basically having a few oscillators that are detuned from each other. So let's have a play. Over here with the oscillator section, I'm going to set up the first oscillator to be a square. And the second oscillator I'm going to turn on, make that a square as well. And now what I want to do is detune one of the oscillators. And we're also too hard on the keyboard, so let's go down. We'll do an F. Alright, so let's put a filter on this. So I'm going to choose low pass 4, but low pass 2 is a good option, and so is daft. Turn the resonance down. Alright, so there we go. There's the start of a hoover. Not too shabby. Now one thing that's kind of happening is because it's just two oscillators, as they phase in and out from each other because of the detuning, you're actually losing volume. We could solve that with a compressor or dial in a third oscillator that has different timing as well to offset that. So let's dial in the third one, square wave, and we'll detune this the other way, just something different to the second one. Now it's kind of modulating all over the show, but it's a bit more even overall. Cool beans. Alright, so let's go back to a single oscillator and try a different method. The next one I'm going to basically talk about is just the chorus. A chorus effect is a great way to get modulation going on. So if we've got a single oscillator, but right now it's static. If we go to the effects section and get a chorus, we turn it on, and that's creating movement as well. What this is basically doing is it's just taking the single voice of the oscillator and creating a duplicate and then modulating each voice separately. It's also adding some stereo spread as well. Okay, so we've got the idea of multiple oscillators and also chorus. Let's go back a step. Let's try using one oscillator again and add movement in a different way. So we can go pulse phase width modulation. So what we want to do here is basically get a square wave, but be modulating the phase width, the width of that square, so that it changes its waveform constantly. At the moment, it's set between a pulse and a saw, pulse being a square wave. If we dial it over to square, you're not going to hear anything because the pulse width by default is at full, which means it's phased it right out. If we double click on it, I'll bring it to center. There's a perfect square wave again. But what we want to do is have this pulse width modulating like this. Or slower than that. So we'll use an LFO. So we'll get the fifth LFO, chuck this on the pulse width, dial it up, just do a bit of checking here, we'll make this sine wave only. We'll turn restart off, so it's not restarting every time I hit a note. Pretty good. So that adds movement. Without it, it's just too flat. Let's try turn that chorus back on. So combining those two tricks gives you a pretty good result too. Doesn't have to be just a pulse width modulation as well. We can do it with waveforms too, any other waveforms. Let's turn that oscillator off and go to the second one. We could try any of these other waveforms. For example, let's try one of these ones up here in the analog electric section. Let's go get one of these drives maybe. So we can mess around with the wavetable position and get a similar result. So let's put another oscillator, a different one, on that wavetable position. Dial it up. Cool. It's moving around. Try some other waveforms. It's even better. It's a bit weird. Dial in some resonance to give it a bit more of a low-mid boost. So that's now modulating the wavetable position of the second oscillator using drive to wavetable. Let's try and dial in that first oscillator again as well. Now we're getting heaps of movement. Dial it back a little bit, in fact. Turn on that chorus. Sweet. So that sounds pretty good. So another way of getting multiple voices going on and having them all modulating is of course using unison. So let's turn chorus off. Oscillator 2 off. Let's dial it right back to just a basic square. Static. Right, voicing. We'll go to this tab here. So we can basically, we'll turn this to monophonic and we'll dial in several voices that stack at the same time. So we'll go up to say 4. Right now they're all sort of perfectly on top of each other, so it kind of sounds wrong. So what we can kind of do is distribute those voices across the pitch and stereo spread. So let's turn on pitch cutoff and dial up the pitch lower threshold, just a few digits. Too loud. So we're getting that movement, and then let's push each voice into its own position on the stereo spread as well. Cool. Let's dial some things back in. So let's go back to using a phase width modulated waveform. We'll bring that pulse width back to where it was. Turn on the second oscillator as well. And the chorus. Getting a great hoover going on. Okay, so another trick we can do as well is vibrato. Now it's already set up as part of the new sound. But basically what vibrato does, if we go over to this panel here, is it dials in a depth amount and a speed amount that causes the oscillators to waver in terms of pitch. And this also gives heaps of modulation. So it's going to be hard to hear with all the unison ons. Let's dial that off. Open the filter a little bit. Maybe dial the chorus back a bit as well, just so we can hear it. In fact, I'm going to pull it right back to just basically one oscillator. Then we're going to dial this vibrato in. So basically it's controlling these knobs here. Push it even further. So hopefully you can hear that. It's just basically wavering in terms of pitch. Maybe it's too fast, so we'll pull that down a bit. The fact that we can overtly hear it means we've probably done it too much, so we'll dial it back until we just can't hear it anymore. Probably halfway. But that will still have a heap of effect on the sound and make it sound nice and warm and lush. Cool, let's turn back on some of these tricks. So oscillator 2. Unison, up to 4. Whoa, dial that back. Basically vibrato becomes very apparent with unison on. Probably got way too much going on now. Pull it all back a little bit. Pull that back. Maybe I'll dial one of the amps of these oscillators back as well. And then chorus, do we want this on? Sure, gives us some width. Alright, so what have we covered? We kind of covered stacking multiple oscillators with different pitch tunings. We covered the chorus effect. We covered unison. We've covered oscillator modulation with the pulse width or the wavetable position. The last thing you can kind of do to add a bit of modulation to hoovers is a bit of mod on the old cutoff. So let's get another LFO. We'll use the 7th one. If it's not an LFO, you can change it here in the top right. And let's put this on the filter. So over here, on the filter, dial it up. Bit slow. Let's try and sync it with the beat. So if we go restart on sync, We'll make it, say, on 8th notes. At the moment it sounds so fat, probably even too fat, so let's dial it back a little bit. It's probably all coming from these oscillators. Too much pulse width in this case. Probably too much width is here as well. Probably too much detuning as well. We'll pull that right off. That sounds cool. So there you go. You can also add some modulation to just the cutoff as well. Okay, so let's put that to a beat. I've already made a beat, so let's give it a listen. Just a basic liquid drum and bass beat. Alright, so I'll just cover what's going on here with these drums, but I won't go into too much detail because we do have another tutorial on the channel covering making drum and bass drums from scratch. So just basically what we've got going on here is two instances of Atlas. So essentially fundamental drums and also our breaks loop to add more groove. So let's have a look here. We've got Atlas here for the fundamental drums. So I'll just solo this using command. So just a basic drum and bass beat here. And here's the pattern. So one of the reasons that we use Atlas is because it's really easy to just swap all the sounds out. So if we've got a beat here, I can just hit new kit. And just instantly get a brand new beat. So that's your fundamental drum, so I'll just go back. Yep, cool, that was the original beat. And we also have a groove loop, a breaks loop. So over here, second instance of Atlas. I'll just solo this as well. Same kind of situation, a different pattern, and a different kit. So for the processing, I've just got basically a bit of a reverb, Valhalla room, a little bit of dirt from Native Instruments to kind of grit it up a little bit, compressor, supercharger, an EQ, which has been pretty heavily processed, so massive high pass, massive low pass, and a little bit of boosting. And the last one, if I can see it, is Decimort for adding vintage sounding bit crush. So yeah, I'll close all those. And once again, we can just hit new kit and change out all the samples and get a brand new breaks loop. So that's pretty good. Okay, and so the fundamental drums and the breaks loop are being routed into the group channel. And we've got some universal audio plugins here to help add some analog vibe to it. So preamp helps thicken it up. Then also using the vitalizer to help give it a bit of stereo width and also add some artificial highs and lows to give it a bit of warmth and brightness. And lastly, the Fatso compressor, which I really like for drum loops, really warms it up as well. Sounds really under-processed without it. So cool, so that's the drums. Alright, so we've got our drums. We've got our bass line. What I might quickly do is just make a few last minute changes. For the purposes of this tutorial, I've kind of had the cutoff a little bit higher than normal just so you can hear things. But I might actually just dial it back a little bit so it's a bit more subby. And it sounds like it's doing a bit too much LFO, so I'll pull this back a little bit too. Just going to pull the amp down on LFO 7. Just so it's a bit flatter. And we'll record a pattern and then record a loop. So let's do a pattern. I'll just wing this. Alright. Alright, let's quantize that. Cool, so basically a liquid drum and bass as well. We're not going to add side chain to this bass. All the drums basically sit on top of the sub. That's basically that. So let's record that as an audio loop. So audio channel, external from 21 massive, monitor in, audio to sends only so we don't hear a duplicate of the audio. Hit record. there we go. There's the audio loop. So that's one drum and bass hoover and one audio loop. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to record 10 more. I'll make 10 more massive patches, 10 more patterns, and I'll record 10 loops, and then I can give them all to you. So just give me a second. Alright, cool. So I've done that. Got 10 bass lines here, 10 massive patches, and 10 patterns, 10 loops. So each one's slightly different, using different techniques from what we've talked about, but they all basically end up being subby, hoovery bass lines. Let's give all the audio loops a listen. So from the top, the first one that we had. Alright, sweet. 10 audio loops there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to package them all up, the patches, the audio loops, and the MIDI patterns, and put them in a pack that you can download from the description, or you can get it from our website. So just to cover again the main points of how to make a hoover, it's really just a sub layer with heaps of movement. So after, of course, having a filter in there to cut out any highs and reduce it down to a sub, you can use multiple oscillators and have that different pitch tunings. You can use a chorus effect, you can use unison, you can use vibrato and dial a bit of that in. You can modulate the pulse width of a square wave. You can also modulate the wavetable position of other waveforms. Add to that a nice little progressive bassline rhythm, and you've got yourself an awesome hoover for a liquid drum and bass track. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Make sure you check out the other drum and bass tutorials on our channel. We've got one that's covering more angry, epic drum and bass, and also one that goes into more details on drum and bass drums as well. So you can check those out. But as always, catch you next time.